I want to bring into the conversation now a reporter with the Washington Free Beacon, Aaron Sibarium, who really has been leading the journalistic charge here, kind of unearthing and uncovering some of these instances of plagiarism amongst Gay's scholarship. And Aaron joins me now. Aaron, thanks for being with us here. And I kind of, I'm putting it mildly. I mean, you really have been on this beat here, looking into and unearthing some of these allegations and instances of plagiarism that have only grown since you first reported on some of them. So much so you were reporting on new ones just this very time last night here. Did you think when you woke up today you'd get this news?
No, I did not. I wasn't exactly sure what would happen, but my tentative guess had been that she would find some pretext to resign 1 or 2 years down the line. It did seem to me like her support on the faculty had withered sufficiently that she would not be a particularly long-serving president of Harvard. But I have to say, I was not expecting her to resign quite this quickly.
Yeah, I have the letter in front of me. She says this. She says, "It is with a heavy heart, but a deep love for Harvard that I write to share that I will be stepping down as president." She goes on to say, "I believe in the people of Harvard because I see in you the possibility and the promise of a better future." And I think this came as somewhat of a surprise to a lot of people who follow this story. She only became Harvard's president last July. And so this makes her kind of the shortest tenured president there at Harvard. I want to put up this tweet from our friend Josh Kraushaar, who was kind of quoting some of these words from Bret Stephens in the New York Times. And I want to get your kind of reaction to this. On Claudine Gay, he says, Bret Stephens, "How did someone with a scholarly record as thin as hers, she's not written a single book, has published only 11 journal articles in the past 26 years and made no seminal contributions to her field, reach the pinnacle of American academia?" And then you have everything, Aaron, happening, of course, in the fallout of the Israel-Hamas war, instances of anti-Semitism on college campuses, and that, kind of doomed hearing that we all saw, some of the equivocating going on here. So that's kind of the timeline at play. What did you make of what Bret Stephens said there?
Yeah, I think it's hard to speculate about exactly why they chose her to be president. There are obviously theories that it had to do with her race, with her ideology, all of that. I think a part of this story that has not received sufficient coverage is that Claudine Gay was really groomed as a professional college administrator. She was the dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences before becoming president of Harvard. She had spent much of her career at Harvard, not primarily as a scholar, but primarily as an administrator, kind of occupied this entirely parallel track, parallel from that of scholarship, which is really more focused on simply making things run. And obviously people can debate whether there should be such parallel tracks in the university in the first place. But in a certain sense, I think she's kind of an avatar for the larger transformation of higher education over the past several decades, which has been that it is shifted from a largely kind of faculty-governed enterprise to a largely administratively governed enterprise at the expense, many would argue, of traditional scholarly virtues. And in some sense, I think the kind of conclusion of this whole saga has vindicated a lot of those critiques of a kind of administrative heavy university. It does seem like that comes at the cost of scholarship in certain cases.
Aaron, you cover higher education so closely here, and a lot of people have been kind of wondering, was she forced out? Was this a voluntary resignation? Because, to your point, after some of these first allegations of plagiarism, came out and exposed by you, the Board of Overseers at Harvard largely stood by her. And so was there a moment, do you think, where some of your reporting was the moment where it broke the camel's back, so to speak, where she just could not withstand all of these allegations? And I guess this is kind of a long diatribe here. I'm kind of curious, What was the impetus for you to start looking into some of Claudine Gay's scholarly work after that hearing?
I'll take those in reverse order.
Sure.
The impetus was simply that I received a tip, and it seemed pretty interesting. I think, frankly, regardless of the hearing and regardless of the anti-Semitism stuff, regardless
So
of
for
the
the
debates
moment that
about
our students
DEI and all of that, uh, it's obviously significant if the president of Harvard University is a serial plagiarist, as was effectively alleged. Um, in terms of whether my reporting was the straw that broke the camel's back, I, I think that the vast, vast majority of the allegations in circulation, there are nearly 50, and I believe that at close to 40 of those, at least, and maybe more, were first reported by me. A few others were reported first by Chris Rufo and Chris Brunette, so I wasn't the only one on the story. But if you just look at the raw number of allegations, it is true that the preponderance of them came from me, and I think that I'm speculating, but it probably did become clear at some point to the university that this wasn't going away, and if after we surfaced dozens of allegations, then we published an official complaint that had 40, and then we found more. So it wasn't just there was one shot of these. It was like, there were 3 times where the university thought, is this it? And then it wasn't it.
I see.
So, sure, I suspect that played into their psychology somehow.
Yeah, Aaron, I'm also kind of curious about your reporting about the nature of Harvard's investigation into these allegations itself. Did you have a window into that?
Not as much of a window as I would have liked, because the Harvard Corporation was a black box and refused to respond to any of my requests for comment, including my requests in which I asked them very detailed questions designed in part to elicit exonerating information. I did not want to go after them or Claudine Gay if this wasn't actually as bad as it looked on the surface. So I gave them lots of chances to tell me, oh, actually, this policy isn't what you think. We actually did it this way. They could have at any point over the past few weeks disclosed information that made what now looks like just a crazy sort of cover-up look less like that, but they didn't at all, despite having the multiple opportunities to. So to me, that indicates that whatever information has yet to be surfaced, it's probably not information that would make the university look good, because if it were, they would have told me it in an effort to make themselves look good, but they didn't.
Yeah. Part of this story as well is the fact and the kind of atmospheric nature of some of these allegations, the double standard part of the story, where, if you were any old Harvard freshman, you wouldn't last a chance if you had made as many of these instances of plagiarism as the president of Harvard University. Did a lot of students kind of echo that sentiment to you?
Yeah. Students, professors, a lot of people I've spoken to off the record, that has been the attitude, that the double standard is really the problem. And I think you see that in the reporting from Harvard student newspaper, The Crimson. Even the editorial The Crimson published in support of Gay, saying, yes, she plagiarized, but she shouldn't resign, at least not yet. The title alone kind of showed how much support she lost. It was such a tepid defense of her. But in that article, the editorial board of the Harvard Crimson basically said, look, we have to acknowledge that if a student did this, they would get in a lot of trouble. It became impossible to ignore that. And I think you were asking about whether it was my reporting that whether that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Maybe, but the majority of the weight, the real driving force behind it that I think made it hard for them to keep Gay, was just this double standard
Yeah.
and the fundamental impossibility of punishing students for plagiarism and maintaining academic standards,
Yeah.
while the president of the university has been shown to have so flagrantly and thoroughly violated those exact standards with no punishment. I mean, and it was even floated that that could be grounds for a lawsuit the next time they disciplined a kid for plagiarism. So, I mean, the Harvard brand, say what you will about it, people do still, I think, consider Harvard a kind of beacon of academic excellence.
Sure.
It has a reputation it wants to keep. And you just can't maintain a reputation like that if you're not willing to punish students. If you're not able to punish students for flagrant academic misconduct. And it would have been pretty hard to do that with Claudine Gay as the president.
Yeah. Aaron, where does your reporting take you next? One of the kind of tracks that I'm kind of curious is how weren't some of these instances of plagiarism caught, well before she kind of exceeded to the top at Harvard? These are from the late 90s. Didn't anyone look into this before?
Well, you would think, but it looks like they didn't, or if they did, they must have kept it a closely guarded secret.
Okay.
And look, I think that that's, again, part of what eroded her support among the faculty. My sense is that a lot of people weren't just mad at her, but were mad at the Harvard Corporation for not doing their due diligence. I think some faculty and also donors have kind of said on the record, look, these guys didn't do their homework. They should have done a background check, especially since, as has been noted, she has not published anywhere near as much as most other tenured faculty members. So it really wouldn't have taken that long to do a cursory plagiarism check. And they didn't do one. Maybe that will be the norm going forward, but this stuff was out there.
Okay.
And the initial, some of the allegations from her dissertation were out there as early as January of last year.
Oh.
She became the president in July. So they had a good 6 months in which these allegations, at least 6 months in which these allegations were circulating online before she became president.
Okay.
And you would think that they would have turned up at least those particular allegations and addressed them. So the fact that they appear not to have even done that, that is a pretty big oversight.
Yeah. Aaron, just lastly, too, if you could interview Claudine Gay, what would you ask her? I'm sure you've tried to interview her.
Good question. There's I guess there's the obvious, was this intentional, was it not? But what
Sure.
the answer you're going to get for that. No, of course it wasn't, blah, blah, blah. I might ask her, frankly, what I would ask her about actually is not really the plagiarism scandal, because I just think the facts here are pretty self-evident. I'd probably grill her on many of the other things she did before this even came up. Not even the anti-Semitism stuff, because that also, I think the facts there are pretty self-evident. But her role in the ouster, or at least the temporary ouster of Roland Fryer at Harvard, this very famous Black economist who was punished allegedly for Title IX related reasons, but suspiciously only after he had published some findings about police brutality that were not congenial to the liberal narrative. I'd ask her, what was going on there? I'd ask her why she thought it was important to strip an administrative post from Ronald Sullivan, a very well-known African-American criminal defense attorney and Harvard law professor who served on Harvey Weinstein's defense team. There have been all sorts of cases like this of professors who've been punished for really things that seem either minor or things that seem like they shouldn't be problems at all. And she was involved in a lot of those decisions as Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. I would just kind of grill her on that because I think she frankly still has not been asked in a meaningful way to account for her role in those controversies. And in some ways, those controversies have in some ways been the least defensible things about her tenure as a Harvard administrator, in my view.
I see. Aaron Sibarium there with the Washington Free Beacon. We have to leave it at that. We do appreciate your time, and I think we'll be speaking again. Thanks so much.